If you've been using ChatGPT for a while, you know that the better the prompt, the better the response you will get. This is a skill set called prompt engineering, which like any other skill requires a lot of learning and a lot of time to practice. But instead of spending hundreds of dollars on some courses, or maybe even dozens of hours learning different techniques on how to write better prompts, what if the prompt could write itself? Hi, if you're new here, my name is Waldo, and I'm here to share my journey as I try to master AI tools like ChatGPT. And in this video, I'm going to show you 2 GPTs from the GPT Store, which are now accessible and free, that were specifically created to write or to rewrite prompts in such a way that you can get the best result with the least amount of effort. Before we dive into these 2 GPTs, let me briefly talk about the basics of prompt engineering. Jeff Su, a productivity YouTube star, explained in his video that a good prompt needs 6 key components. Those are a very specific, clear task, provide just the right amount of context, use examples, define a persona or role, specify the format of the results, and lastly, the tone of the response GPT should take. But this video is not about learning how to apply all of these elements into your prompting. This is a video about how these 2 GPTs can consider all of these best practices to write the prompt for you. Prompt Engineer is a completely free GPT that helps create or improve prompts for LLMs like ChatGPT. In other words, it seeks to understand your goals and writes an optimized prompt based on the information and context you feed it. Once I open a GPT, I get presented 2 options. Let's check out its prompt builder. As soon as I hit that build a new prompt from scratch button, the GPT is now asking me 4 very specific questions. Those are: what exactly is the task that I'm looking to do? What is the type of output that I'm expecting? Any specific guidelines or constraints? And lastly, who is my target audience? Now, to answer this prompt, I want to write an email to my boss asking for a raise. I want it to be professional yet persuasive, highlighting 3 of my past accomplishments. I want to highlight how I've been exceeding expectations and I'm below market pay. And lastly, this is addressed to my direct manager. Judging by the final result alone, that email is looking pretty darn good. Although I wish it asked me some follow-up questions about my accomplishment and what exactly those are, but that is an easy fix that I can just simply ask ChatGPT to include them by writing them out. Let's break down Prompt Engineer's exact prompt, which was the point of this video. Let's review it in the context of the elements we discussed earlier. The prompt starts off with a very clear task and also sets a tone and style of the email. Then, the prompt provides the format of the response, which at the same time also provides context. And lastly, it emphasizes again the tone of the email and clarifies the overarching intent. I have to say that this looks to me like a really well-written prompt, and I barely did anything. But how good exactly is this prompt? Let's run a similar example straight into ChatGPT using the exact same task or goal. I'm going to write into ChatGPT, I want to write an email to my boss asking for a raise. That seems pretty standard, right? As you can see, ChatGPT still accomplished a task I asked it, but the response I got seemed a bit short and a bit generic. Of course, I could have provided more context and more specific ask and even sub-ask and all of these other elements, but the point here is that I would need to know these best practices and prompt techniques in order to get the better result. For that reason, the Prompt Engineer GPT has some serious advantages, especially for those new to prompt engineering or using ChatGPT in general. If you thought the Prompt Engineer GPT was cool, well, this next GPT can do just about the same, but adds an interesting educational approach to it. The GPT I'm referring to is called Prompt Professor, and it ranked number 10 in the GPT Store under the educational category. Starting a chat with it, let's use its prompt reader function and plug in our original non-optimized prompt and see what happens. That prompt was, I want to write an email to my boss asking for a raise. Prompt Professor then rates our prompt using 12 criteria, which go a little more in depth compared to the 6 criteria we looked at earlier. These are not necessarily better, just a different approach. The educational piece here I mentioned earlier is that next to each of the criteria, there's a short explanation which can really help level up your understanding of prompt engineering techniques. Prompt Professor also has other pre-built conversations that help you learn and improve your prompting. However, since today's video is more about the lazy way or the shortcut to getting optimized prompts, we won't be focusing on that and instead be focusing on the results. As you can imagine, given how simple our prompt is, we can see very low scores across the board. What's interesting here is that Prompt Professor then proceeds to provide an optimized prompt and then scores itself. Talk about tooting your own horn. Just like last time, let's break down the prompt sentence by sentence. Here, the main task was left unchanged. Key context and background is provided. And lastly, a combination of tone and format is included all within that one sentence. However, it did not proceed to outputting the result of the optimized prompt. So let's do that by just copying and pasting the prompt into the chat. And the results are quite good, and as expected, very specific to the way the prompt was structured earlier. Comparing back to our first GPT, Prompt Engineer actually required a few more inputs and gave more ways to influence the prompt and the results that we would want. However, Prompt Professor came up with just as good a result with even less inputs. The point here is that prompt engineering is a skill that takes time and practice to get better at. But there are tools out there, even free ones, that can speed up your learning curve and even cut out most of the work for you so you can get the best results possible. However, if I can coin the phrase, there is no such thing as a perfect prompt. They can only become good enough. So keep at it, experiment. Even without knowing anything about prompt engineering, you can still get excellent results from ChatGPT and other LLMs. And if you're interested in learning more on prompt engineering, click this video next and subscribe to stay up to date with my journey as I look to master AI.